Okay, if you haven't heard of Draw Steel yet, it's a big production tabletop role-playing game whose design team is led by Matt Colville, a former video game developer who has since earned fame as a D&D advice guy and commentator in the RPG space. His game raised about $4.6 million on BackerKit at the beginning of 2024, with over 30,000 backers, myself being one of them, and the game has since been accepted as a sort of heavily designed, tactically interesting game that appeals to fans of the D&D 4th edition approach to combat. Specifically, it leans into the idea of tactical heroic fantasy, where players have a suite of dependable abilities that minimizes whiffing. By removing the traditional to-hit roll, Draw Steel has shifted the focus towards positioning, forced movement, and resource spending, so encounters feel more like a high-stakes puzzle rather than a slog of attrition. That's the long and short of it. My main problem with this game, personally, is that the setting and overall genre are brain-meltingly boring. It's just the most generic of fantasy, pure and simple. But if you're trying to sell books to a very well-identified audience of D&D enthusiasts, this choice of genre is a safe bet, and I can't fault them for that. And more importantly, to the credit of Matt Colville and his team, they left the door open to third-party variants of their game and allowed designers to come in and tweak the rules and change the setting to whatever they want. And because of that generosity and open-mindedness about their game, we have Night Shift Devil Division. This is an upcoming RPG by Slightly Reckless Games, the creators of Ronin, which I covered on this channel. That was a feudal, supernatural, Japan-themed game using the Mork-Borg rules. They've also published Berserker, which is a supernatural Viking-themed RPG using the Mork-Borg rules. Night Shift Devil Division puts you in the shoes of an agent in 1990s Tokyo, fighting increasingly powerful devils, which themselves are instantiations of negative thoughts and emotions. The theme is shonen anime, heavily leaning towards the influence of Jujutsu Kaisen, Demon Slayer, and Chainsaw Man. In series like Jujutsu Kaisen and Chainsaw Man, the monsters are born directly from the collective fears of the modern populace, manifestations of human anxiety. The fight scenes in these shows are defined by a steady mechanical escalation, where characters spend the early moments of an encounter, or even entire episodes, probing for weaknesses and stacking seemingly minor tactical advantages. As a confrontation progresses, these abilities culminate in peaks where the scales of power explode into a massive spectacle. And this is really the solution to Draw Steel, for me personally, right here. Whereas the original game is set in a forgettable milquetoast fantasy world derived from Dungeons and Dragons, Night Shift is trying to give us a slightly more interesting, specific, and unique setting. I think that's an extremely valuable proposition that makes me really want to sit up and pay attention to Draw Steel's rules. But the folks who are making Night Shift go a lot further than just reskinning the game to this subgenre of dark shonen anime. They've tweaked a number of rules in the game to make it fit the setting a bit better, as well as maybe run a little more smoothly. What I want to do in the rest of this video is briefly go over each of those major tweaks and additions they've made to the original Draw Steel rules, and you can be the judge as to whether that's something that improves the game or not. And at the end of the video, I'll give you my honest thoughts about this project so far, which at the time of recording is crowdfunding. I'll leave links below. By the way, at the time I'm recording this, the Night Shift books are not yet fully laid out and illustrated. So just a heads up here that when I show you some stuff from the game, it will not be presented in the beautiful, densely colorful, and illustrated final spreads that you'll eventually find it as across the two A4 sized books. Alright, let's jump in. Okay, the first big tweak. Devils as recurring characters and assets, including buddies, detained devils that fight alongside the squad. Okay, to be fair to Draw Steel, on page 1 of the monster book, it very lovingly describes monsters as creatures with lives. They have cultures and abilities and beliefs, and right here it actually says they can even become allies to the heroes adventuring alongside them as retainers. And here it is on page 351 of the monster book, a whole set of rules for retainers. Now, to be fair to Night Shift, I think fights in Draw Steel are generally treated as a binary struggle, where 99% of the time, monsters must be deconstructed, rather than co-opted, whereas in Night Shift, one of the primary themes of the game is about leveraging a devil's power for future encounters. And in that sense, Night Shift evolves the experience from the traditional hero versus monster conflict into a more complex procedural where enemies become strategic tools. At its core, it adds a layer of asset management that one might describe as Pokemon on steroids. The next change, rewards shift towards vault abilities, division loadouts, commendations, and clearance progress. So Draw Steel is largely pretty traditional in terms of character rewards. You have treasures, titles, renown, and wealth. And when it comes to Night Shift, I don't yet have information on a lot of the progression mechanics mentioned here, but I can show you how clearance works. It's essentially a bureaucratic designation for your character. You can raise it by meeting objectives, reducing civilian exposure, and generally just being a really good agent. And by raising your clearance level in the organization that you work for, you get access to things like NPC operatives and better access to the vault, which is, from what I gather, a collection of captured devils. Dedicated chase mechanics. Draw Steel handles chases as a specialized application of the montage test. A chase is treated essentially as a narrative sequence where the GM sets a goal and players describe cinematic vignettes to overcome obstacles rather than round by round movement. The montage test will ultimately result in either a total success, partial success, or a total failure. With Night Shift, by providing a full chapter for chases, I assume that the game is trying to transform a quick narrative transition into a core pillar of the gaming experience, with undoubtedly more mechanical depth. This is important if you feel that chases are a big part of emulating the dark urban shonen anime genre. Fear as a damage type. Draw Steel treats fear as a status condition, which is very D&D. There are banes and edges associated with the source of the frightened condition. Night Shift treats fear as a full-on type of damage. This doesn't seem like much of a big deal, but it's probably related to how the devils, the main category of monsters in the setting, even come about in the world. Devils are the crystallization of one kind of fear or another, so there's a thematic connection to the mechanic of fear damage. Okay, these last two additions to the rules might be my favorites. Banter between rounds. Brief exchanges of taunts, threats, and probing dialogue. I don't know if this is going to be formalized into any kind of hard mechanic that alters the course of the fight, but I love the idea of coercing players into doing more than just plug away at a combat with their items and abilities. This notion here has the potential to scare up a bit more roleplay at the table. And finally, when a powerful ability is used for the first time, hit your chosen 90s banger, trigger a flashback showing how it was earned. I love this, just a purely cinematic flashback meant to lean into the genre that the game is trying to emulate. And I guess from this sentence, you need to have your favorite 90s song on hand. This is the sort of thing I would totally pre-plan for my character before a session. So yeah, I think for the first time since Draw Steel came out, I'm actually excited about learning and playing with the rules. The original game runs about 800 pages, many of which look like this, whereas the creators of Night Shift are aiming more towards a game whose interior pages look more like this. And the whole game might run a couple hundred pages less than Draw Steel across two books. So it's potentially more of a palatable reading and playing prospect. If I had to give you some cons about this game so far, I would say 1, combat's still long. You know, both Draw Steel and Night Shift claim that the rules provide fast cinematic action, but let's be honest with each other here. Draw Steel and all of its spin-offs are about interesting combat tactics. There's just nothing really fast about the combat with Draw Steel, and that's okay. It's tactical, it's just not fast. 2, people need to watch some of this anime. I don't think I'd want to run or play this game with people who haven't at least watched some of the media touchstones that inspired this game. It's trying to emulate those big anime moments. So if players have never seen those moments play out in the shows, then it's less likely that they'll ever be able to emulate the intended spirit of the game. Pros, not boring fantasy. That's the main point of this video. I think Night Shift does the most important thing here, which is deliver the Draw Steel rules, which have been heavily tested and meticulously polished, through a fresher, more interesting setting. It's all personal preference, obviously. I just don't find myself titillated by settings like this anymore. Incredible art. I noticed that this publisher, who I mentioned did Ronin and Berserker, tends to tap some really incredible artists for their books. And really, Night Shift might be showcasing some of the best art out of all of their publications to date. Starter set. The crowdfund options include a starter set box as well as a digital starter kit, which are things that can help people feel out the game before going all in on what is frankly a pretty ambitious and high commitment game. There's so much more that I want to see from this project that has yet to be developed. I really want to know more about the vault and about the lore of the agency that your character works for. I have some big questions about the rules too, but I guess I'll just have to wait until it comes out. If you're interested in more details about Night Shift, links for everything are below. I'll see you in the next one.